Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Harnessing the Power of Cloud-Based Remote Digital Signage and Kiosk Management, a webinar hosted by Digital Signage Today and sponsored by Intel and 42 Gears. My name is Bradley Cooper. I'm the editor of Digital Signage Today, and I'll be moderating today's panel with Jim Malquist, who is with 42 Gears, Wasif Syed, 42 Gears, Corey T. Morris of Intel, and Meen T. Prom of Intel. One major issue with digital signage is how one can handle content, especially on multiple displays at once. Today, our panelists will be sharing some of the benefits of cloud-based content management and how you can harness its power for your business. Please feel free to submit any questions during the webinar, which will be answered during a Q&A immediately following the presentation. With that, I'll pass the mic off to Corey.
Thanks, Bradley. Thanks, everybody, for joining this webinar today. I'll be covering the Intel portion of this webinar. And today we're going to talk about what is vPro technology and Intel AMT, or Active Management Technology. How do you identify these systems, and if you have them, and how do you enable the technology? So, Jim?
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for joining everybody, appreciate it. I'm Jim Malmquist from 42 Gears, and I'll be providing an overview of our flagship solution called SureMDM. We're going to show you how to identify and manage devices utilizing the vPro platform, and we'll focus on some typical industry pain points for the digital signage and kiosk industries, and how we can specifically address those issues with this solution. We're also going to be showcasing a few demos today, because let's face it, everybody likes a demo over a PowerPoint. So, and then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how to get started with the solution, and we're going to be answering questions from our live chat. So please be sure to ask questions during the webinar via the chat feature. We have a whole team of folks ready to answer them in real time at the end. So looking forward to seeing those questions.
All right, thanks, Jim. Well, I'll kick it off with talking about vPro and Intel AMT at a high level of 40,000 feet and all the way down to how you turn this technology on so that SureMDM can take advantage of this technology. So to start off, vPro platforms are designed for Internet of Things, IoT, and business computing environments. vPro itself is an umbrella of technologies which comprise of four main pillars. Performance, which is enhanced for commercial and business platforms. Hardware, enhanced security. Stability, where we have Intel SIP programs that validate for 15 months, no major changes will happen. And last but not least, manageability, where we're going to focus in today just on this pillar and called Intel AMT, or Active Management Technology. So we'll give you a high level all the way down to how you turn that on, and we'll begin now. So vPro itself has been around for 14 years. So it's nothing new. It's a very mature, robust solution. But we'll start where we were in the beginning in 2006. So how it all came about was taking IPMI from the server world, the HP iLOs and the Dell DRAC, and bringing that technology down into the client. Over those years, we enhanced the capability and introduced hardware-based keyboard video mouse for remote KVM. We also introduced a host-based configuration to ease the activation portion of enabling these devices, which we'll talk more about. And then in the latter years, we really focused on security and manageability enhancements to harden the actual product of Intel AMT. So vPro and AMT is used hand in hand. vPro itself is the brand, and AMT is the actual manageability aspect of the vPro brand. So vPro is a very robust, secure, mature management solution that is designed on a common device architecture, which covers many verticals shown below. And so these verticals, go ahead, Jim.
Corey, just I want to point out the platforms below that you mentioned. I think we're focusing today on how we manage digital signs and kiosks, but I think it's really important to point out that vPro can be configured in many different devices, correct? And that the solutions that we'll see today will work on other types of devices as well?
You're absolutely. Yeah, they're all the purpose-built devices out there that include in healthcare, also in education, like interactive whiteboards and large format displays for the kids, and even things like industrial. So you're right, it spans all vertical.
Yeah, great.
All right, moving on. So what comprises or makes up a vPro platform? So we have three main hardware components that make up a vPro platform. First is the right processor. You're going to have a Core i5, a Core i7, or Core i9 processor, or even a single socket Xeon. About 80% on average of these processors have the capability of vPro. Coupled with the right chipset, which is the Q or QM for the mobile series for the core products, and then the C series chipset for the Xeon. And lastly, the network. This is the most important piece. The Intel LAN controller, Intel Wi-Fi controller are designed to have a unique power rail that stays on so you can wake them up with Intel AMT functions. Once you have those three hardware components together, you get Intel Active Management technology enabled in the platform. We also have another product called Intel Standard Manageability, and it also supports Intel AMT, but the big difference is it supports Pentium and i3 and the same chipset, the Q series, and it only supports desktop, so you only see the Intel LAN controller. So how does all this technology work? So to begin, you get the network traffic, it all goes through the network interface, through the Intel management engine on the board, where Intel AMT resides as like a small processor, and then passes things into the operating system. So at this point, AMT is a hardware-based management solution below the OS. So if we wanted to have the OS up and running, Intel AMT will be in what we call passive mode, allowing the OS to take ownership of most things. If the OS is not there, it's not loaded or it's crashed, Intel AMT is now in active mode, still has the ability to IP addressable and get to that machine and do your functions. So we can even cut off the internet to the OS and still maintain a connection to Intel AMT. So it's clearly below the operating system. So let me give you an example of a vPro and non-vPro type environment so you can clearly see the difference. So in this particular case, we're using a retail platform, and it experiences a fatal crash of some sort. At that point, they would reach out to a command center or IT group, and they would try to connect to the device using an in-band tool, in-band meaning the OS is running, and we refer to out-of-band as below the operating system. So let's keep those terms handy. So they will not be able to connect to this device because the OS is not functioning. Therefore, the team viewers, the logmans, the remote desktops that you typically use won't work. So what happens? They have to dispatch a technician. The technician will then have to be sent on site, and that would take a numerous amount of time, and the costs vary, but the cost will definitely be high. So you compare that with a vPro platform, same thing, but this time vPro enabled. And now when the command center wants to then look at the screen, they still cannot see an in-band, but they're going to now have another tool at their fingertips, Intel AMT. So they're going to initiate a request to the platform, and now they're going to be able to remotely see the screen as if they were sitting in front of the device. And you can see this border around the screen at the retail platform. That signifies that the screen is being redirected to the IT professional. So you can remotely power on, you can power the device up and down, you can recycle it, reboot it, or you can reboot into the BIOS, which we'll show you here in a little bit. You can even restore the operating system remotely, all which saves you time and money, greatly reducing your overall cost. So what we're asking today is take a look at what today's environment looks like. You have in-band, which is predominantly where everybody is managing devices today. We are proposing to interject Intel AMT into the on-site visit portion of your support paradigm. So 30 to 40% roughly can be cut out of your overall support costs just by enabling Intel AMT or Active Management technology into those platforms, greatly reducing costs. Excuse me. So once you get the device, it is enabled by default in the BIOS. So Intel AMT comes enabled, and you receive the platform. The complexity of vPro is not actually enabling the device, it's the environment in which it sits. So when you get the device, you actually have to take ownership or activate the device to get it to work in your environment. So there are two modes in which you can activate. The first and foremost, the one we're going to concentrate the most on today, is admin control mode, where user consent is optional. And this activation mode allows you to have full rights to the machine. So as you're looking at digital signs and kiosks today, nobody's going to be around when you want to connect to that device. It could be way up in the air. It could be a big panel of displays. It could be built into furniture. Nobody has to be at that device for this mode. You can reach out to the device and connect to it. Whereas the other activation mode, far easier to activate the device, but it requires a user consent to see this, the redirected screen to be seen. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to see the screen at that device, the user at that device would have to read a user consent code back to the IT professional. So you can see how this would not work in most digital signs and kiosks, or even a lot of different use cases.
Right.
Yeah. So admin control mode is what we would recommend for digital signs and kiosks. Jim, you going to say anything?
No, I was saying, yeah, you're absolutely right that, you know, it's much better the other way, because not having to have a technician on site is always a good thing.
Yeah, it does. It really cuts it down. All right. Last of my foils is, how do you actually turn this stuff on? There are multiple ways of activating devices. And the first one would be the most obvious, the manual method, in which you can enable a platform when it posts or boots up. You can hit a Control P option. It's a boot option. So as you boots up, you would then enter into this mode where you can activate the device. It's called our Management Engine BIOS Extension, or MEBX. At that point, a couple simple clicks, and your device is activated. You can also replicate that procedure you just did manually into a thumb drive, and then you can boot to it, and then it says, do you want to provision with USB setup? You say Y for yes. So those are very simple setups, but it puts the system in admin control mode. The second method would be more for enterprise customers that have domain and work groups. If you would like to activate in this type environment, we can do it at almost zero touch capability, meaning we'll leverage a third-party certificate where the root hashes are already built into the Intel chipset. And then we get that certificate to replicate the domain that you're registered in, or even a .local address. And then we use that certificate as a one-to-many to provision the devices that are even already deployed, or even new ones that you purchase and you want to activate during a build process. So we can remotely configure those devices and then lock them down. It's a much more robust solution as far as locking down internally with Active Directory, 802.1x, and so on. All right, so I'm going to pass it on to Jim, and he's going to go over some SureMDM.
Yeah, that's great. Corey, thanks. That was awesome. I think, you know, everybody knows who Intel is, but not many of us were familiar with exactly what vPro is or what AMT is. So that was a great overview. I appreciate you going into it in so much depth. Thank you. Not many of you have probably heard of 42 Gears, but we've been in business for over 10 years, have over 11,000 customers with hundreds of thousands of devices under management. And 42 Gears' flagship product is called SureMDM. And this solution allows our customers to manage any device from any location from a central web-based console. SureMDM is in the Unified Endpoint Management space, or UEM for short. And as you can see, we do support all types of mobile devices, from phones to tablets to computers, and as well as IoT devices. And it's in this space that we've had a tremendous amount of traction in the past few years. IoT devices like virtual reality goggles, printers, and then digital signage and kiosks as well, and as well as other simpler things like light bulbs. Our centralized API-driven console lets you quickly find any information you need on a given device, or help you push or enforce any type of policy or application onto the device of choice. So as with any other MDM or UEM solution, we're limited on some of the functionality that we can control by the exposed APIs in the underlying operating system of the device. But with Intel vPro enabled devices, we can get below the operating system and provide additional functionality that is not available with other players in this space.
All right.
So together, SureMDM, Intel vPro, AMT provides, you know, a new solution. So SureMDM has integrated support for Intel vPro, AMT to provide something beyond unified endpoint management, and we call it the ultimate out-of-band endpoint management. Analysts have often reported that the total cost of ownership, or TCO, for a single PC can be 5 times its original price due to maintenance costs, such as productivity loss due to downtime over the life of a given system. So 42 Gears and the Intel vPro platform can help businesses reduce that total cost of ownership. And what we have come up with is a highly reliable solution that enables out-of-band management. And Corey mentioned this in his overview, that out-of-band management So as long as power and network connections are present, out-of-band management does not require the OS at the machine or PC level to be operational. And nor does it require a technician to be on site performing repairs or upgrades, which is always a good thing. The more that we can slow down the truck rolls for technicians to have to be on site, it saves everybody time and money.
That's right.
So Corey, you've been in this industry a long time. Let's review some of the traditional pain points that your customers have experienced in the past, and we'll talk about what we can do for them.
You bet, Jim. Happy to do so. So yes, I have over 14 years of experience along with my partner, Ming-Tu Pham, who's also going to talk at the end of the webinar. We met with hundreds of businesses about remote manageability, and we pulled together 4 common pain points that we see time and time again in digital signs and kiosks. So the first one would be remotely power control for devices outside of normal business hours. Just the ability to be able to reset those digital signs and kiosks when the stores are closed, when you can't get to the devices, and so on. So we'll highlight that. Second one would be remotely accessing the BIOS with the unified endpoint management tools of SureMDM. This is the ability to update BIOSes, change the BIOS password, just get in the BIOS and make configuration changes, all remote. Thirdly, remotely repairing those malfunctioning kiosks. We'll do a nice example of that. And lastly, troubleshooting digital signs remotely, and especially ones that are been exposed at roadsides or casinos and things like that. So we'll dive deeper into each one of these pain points to fully absorb the power of what we're trying to illustrate here with SureMDM. So Jim, let's take us through the first one here.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Corey. So that first pain point that you mentioned was lack of power control. And I've been through this before with, oh wait, that was a different webinar, the lack of control with my wife, but we'll talk about that at a different webinar. This kind of power control is around devices not being powered on. So you probably have been here before, guys. You walk into the terminal of an airport to check your bag, get a boarding pass. You know, there's a really long line at the check-in counter, which probably these days isn't such of a big deal now with COVID-19, but you know what I'm talking about. So you instead of waiting in that line, you turn around and you find that bank of self-service kiosks, and you walk over to them, and it appears that many of the airlines, the check-ins the kiosks that are available have a blank screen. And this is a huge problem for the airlines. They staff that check-in counter to handle a certain percentage of the customers who don't use the kiosks. But when those kiosks malfunctions and you see those black screens, it means that lines can now stack up at the check-in counter, and that provides poor customer experience for everybody. So not only it makes bigger lines and it's time consuming, but even when the airline reports the problem and creates a service ticket to get it fixed, it can be a long time for a technician to even arrive on site, and still take even longer for them to resolve the problem. But if those kiosks were enrolled in SureMDM and had an Intel vPro chip inside, doing a remote reset would let you bring the kiosk back online in minutes, which means the lines move faster and everybody's happier. So let's bring in our sales engineer, Wasif, to show this in action and get to a demo. It's everybody's favorite part. So Wasif, let's take a look at how this looks from our console.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Let's get started with the main landing page of the SureMDM console. So as you can see, I've got quite a few devices enrolled into my console, and
Looks like we're having an issue. There it goes.
Awesome. So quite a few devices enrolled into my console, and then on the left side, I have the grouping structure, where I can organize different groups depending on different locations, different states. When I select a particular group, I see devices enrolled into that group populate onto my center list. For an example, I'm going to select this Windows device, and it shows me device-specific information on the right side, including network, battery, and memory management. We've received a notification from an airport kiosk stating that it has gone offline. So let's go ahead and take a look at that airport kiosk. It does say that it's been offline for more than specified time. So I am going to go ahead and launch the AMT chip on the device. It does say that it's soft off, which basically means that this device is fully powered off. From the power operations menu, I can power it back on. To do that, I'll go ahead and select the power up button and perform the power operation. So I just have to go ahead and select yes. So the SureMDM console on the back end will perform the power operation. And then when I go back into my console, you will see the device will automatically power up. Perfect. So I am back into my console and bam, looks like the device is back up online. Corey, back to you.
Well, thanks, Waf. It's a great demo. And, you know, this is a very common use case problem for digital signage and kiosk customers. They see that they're offline, and historically they'd have to send out a technician if they can't get it back. So using an Intel AMT, you can flip that remote. You don't even have to leave a chair. So good demo. Thanks. All right, second thing we're going to talk about is remotely accessing the BIOS with unified endpoint management tools. So we'll just jump right in. So in this specific use case, we have a digital sign that had a critical failure. The IT group doesn't know how to handle this issue or what's wrong with the device. So they're going to kick off they assume it's a BIOS. They're going to kick off an AMT KVM session, reboot the platform. It's going to post and then go right into the BIOS screen. So you can see again that the highlight of the yellow and red around the screen, it actually flashes like it's Christmas. And it signifies the screen is being remotely redirected. So you always know when you're being out of band or below the operating system and being watched at that point. So this device can be changing the BIOS, it can be updated, you can change the password, and so on. There is also a low bandwidth connection you can do, serial over LAN, which will also emulate the BIOS screen remotely for the IT group. So it's a very powerful tool. It's highlighting the ability just to get into the BIOS, which typically you'd have to be in front of it. And then one other thing I want to note, that we are going through the cloud for this particular purpose. There is an agent on the platform for 42 Gears. In addition, Intel AMT is set up for what we call Intel Sira, Client Initiated Remote Access. And that is calling home to the 42 Gears console in the cloud. So this is a cloud-based environment which the systems can be in a home-like internet connection and always calling back to the cloud console, both in band and out of band. So when SureMDM wants to connect to the device, all they simply have to do is follow the breadcrumbs back down to the hardware. Okay, just wanted to make sure that's clear. So Watts, if you want to show us one more example of this, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So we're back into the SureMDM console, and now we are going to access the AMT chip on the same device again to see what caused the shutdown. To do that, I am going to connect to the Intel NUC from my office and then click on the remote desktop button on the left. I'm going to connect to this device, and it looks like it has a BSOD, which could have been caused by some memory or power issues. Now from the power operations menu, I'm going to boot this device into its setup utility. Let's go back into the remote desktop screen, and I will reconnect to the device. And as you can see, the device is performing a reboot and will now go into the BIOS of the screen from where I can make changes. With SureMDM and Intel AMT vPro, you can also do hardware inventory management as well as audit logs of who did what on these devices. That's how you can handle remote access to the BIOS. Jim, what's the next pain point?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Wasa. That was a great demo, highlighting how SureMDM can access the BIOS of the device. Moving on to that third industry pain point, remotely repairing malfunctioning or down kiosks that Corey had mentioned. So kiosks are becoming more and more a part of our daily lives. They help provide services to decrease wait time or speed up orders. And as more and more companies are depending on kiosks to help run parts of their businesses, the importance of keeping the kiosks up to date and running becomes even more important. So let's consider the next example. A kiosk at a mall that has been configured with pre-boot authentication, or PBA. And we do this to make sure that the data that is on the drive is encrypted for security reasons. The kiosk is experiencing issues where you need to check on the system and get past that pre-boot authentication when it restarts. So you initiate a request to reboot the machine remotely and view it with AMT. Now you watch the system reboot, you perform that power on self-test or post, and then launch the pre-boot authentication. In normal circumstances, without an AMT device, someone would actually have to be on site and enter that pre-boot authentication on the device itself. Since AMT is connecting below the operating system, you are able to enter the pre-boot authentication remotely, just as if you were in front of the system. So imagine the number of on-site visits an organization can reduce with this functionality, and potentially could save them thousands of dollars a year by not needing to send a technician on site for every ticket. This will greatly help the enterprise achieve that ROI on their kiosks. So Corey, why don't you take us into that fourth and final pain point, and we'll keep moving.
You bet, Jim. Thanks. Great example. So we're going to talk about remotely troubleshooting digital signs, and this will be the last example we have. So in our final example, we have a large digital sign typically found on the side of freeways or high visibility to the customers, typically 24 hours a day. So this could be just one example. Other examples would be at malls, fast food menu displays at your local fast food restaurant, point of wait, such as like DMV or any other place you got to wait for a while. And then large format displays at your favorite casino, or even 3D displays in elevators. It doesn't matter what type of digital display, they all have specific purposes, and they're very critical to keep running, so to maximize all the value that you spent putting them up, and people are paying for the advertising. So Wasif showed you earlier with the live demo, you can detect when the agent is offline, and you can actually initiate that connection. So in this one, they don't know what happened to the actual sign, so they're just going to initiate an AMT KVM to see the screen. What status is it in? So they see that it was crashed. At that point, they're going to initiate a reset immediately so the content management system can restart and replay the advertising as scheduled. In this particular example, I just had it going into the Windows environment. But that's just one of the many examples we can do with AMT KVM. And also, just to make it clear, SureMDM also has an in-band KVM as well, which we always recommend getting the devices back up in line and using the in-band over out-of-band for performance reasons. But just being able to see that screen remotely without sending a technician is priceless. So Wasif has got one more example. Do you mind showing us?
Yeah, that's a really easy demo. Let me show that to you really quick. Once I have repaired my Windows operating system from the BIOS screen, I can exit out of the utility, and the device will resume its regular operations. From the remote desktop screen, I can see that the device is booting up into Windows, and now we'll go directly into the content display screen.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That was the quick review. Corey, back to you.
Awesome.
No, thanks, Wasif. Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about. That content management software just automatically starts playing when it comes back up. So it's perfect. All right, so we're going to recap the 4 major pain points. So the first one is remote power control, again, for devices outside of business hours. It can be within business hours. It doesn't matter. This is a screen capture of SureMDM power operations that Wasif has been showing you. You got hardware-based control. That's the whole important part of this. You got boot control and going into the BIOS. The second one was accessing the BIOS with the same tools. You're below the operating system, clearly. You don't have to be at the system to see the BIOS. You can change the configuration remotely. You can even update the password. There's a lot of things we can do at this level. Third one is just remotely repairing those kiosks. And we showed you an example using Microsoft BitLocker. You can do any pre-boot authentication software, a BIOS password, anything that you normally would not be able to see in an in-band keyboard video mouse, you can see it here in Intel AMT. Short of a hardware failure, you'll be able to remediate this device remotely. All you need is a network connection and power. And lastly, we showed you that large digital sign, being able to boot into the OS, and the OS could be Windows or Linux. We support both. And then we also have the ability to look at the hardware inventory, things like memory modules, storage, the processor, the BIOS, even the versions. All of this information can be seen even when the power is off in S5. And lastly, the most important one for most folks are the log files. who did what by what user and what happened is also tracked. So that concludes the webinar portion of our display today. And we'll sit there and conclude it. And Jim's going to go through some of the Q&As along with Brad.
Yeah, no, and I just wanted to reiterate too, Corey, before we step off this page, that
Yeah.
we discussed today around two specific industries, the digital signage and the kiosk. But what I think is important for people to keep in mind is that these also apply to other industries. So I think you mentioned a school early, on that. If you have those display boards in a classroom, being able to remote control those or turn them on or turn them off if somebody's forgotten to turn them on or off remotely. There's all sorts of different use cases that this applies to, and it's not limited to just digital displays and kiosks. So yeah.
That's an excellent point. I mean, just to add to that, vPro itself is a standard in which for an OEM to brand their platform vPro or say it has vPro capabilities, they had to go through a design process with Intel specs to meet that need. Therefore, they'd have to pass a test to comply with the vPro branding. So if you see the sticker, no matter what OEM it is, it supports this technology we just described today, and SureMDM can connect to it.
That's right.
Exactly.
No, I think that's important to remember. So great. So let's take a look at the questions and get some of those answered. I think I saw a few come through. So Ming, do you have a list of questions that we have, or somebody see questions?
I think Bradley's going to
Bradley
speak up at this point. Yeah.
Yes, we do have a bunch of questions in. So the very first one we have is about, we have had an issue getting vPro to working in our environment, and specifically a Nexcom player running on Windows 10 operating system. Do you guys have any suggestions for a better player and operating system?
Yeah, from AMT's perspective, right, so we support the Windows operating systems, right, multiple flavors. So I guess the best answer here would be to reach out to us after the webinar so we can understand the issue that you're having, and we can help you from there. Right?
Yes, that's a fantastic answer. So our next question is how will 5G technology affect future devices?
Again, from an AMT's perspective, 5G will work. Again, the performance with the AMT and the out-of-band management would be much better with the fast network. Yeah,
and I think from a 42 Gears perspective, we take an agnostic approach to the connection method, and we'll support them all. So the faster the connection, the better the speeds, to do things like remote control, and we'll have a better customer experience. I don't know if Wasta, if you have anything else to add on 5G.
No, I think we're connection agnostic, like you mentioned, Jim, and all kinds of connections are supported on the MDM console.
Right, and I think it's important to note too that you can designate a machine through SureMDM to only be able to connect to certain types of networks. So if you wanted to limit the data consumption on the cellular network, for instance, you could limit that through the SureMDM console as well. So there's lots of options there.
Yeah, this is Corey. I'd like to add one more thing, just to paint a picture. So a typical use case on this or example would be a customer that has an ATM environment at a bank, and they want to connect using 4G today. They use a 4G modem or router, and they connect it via RJ45 or an Ethernet cable to the vPro device, and then it still can be managed. The vPro device sees it as a network connection or Wi-Fi. That's the only two options we have today. But we work with 4G today, 3G even. And just so you have that model in your head, it doesn't matter how it's connecting, as long as vPro is connected with a cable or Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter. It's going to communicate.
Excellent. So this next question is, I believe, was about your airport example, and it's saying, when the app operator is updating the BIOS, what will the airport kiosk user be seeing on the screen?
Yeah, good question. So we have a feature where we can blank the screen. Obviously, when the machine is being worked on, especially in the BIOS, we don't want anybody to see what's going on. So we have a screen blanking mechanism where it's just the screen is gonna appear black while you do the service in the background.
Excellent. So our next question is, how does AMT work if a digital sign is connected via cellular?
Yeah, I guess we talked about that, right? So we work through the cellular connections. One thing to add here is when you're redirecting the screen to view the screen of the system, in 3G, again, the performance is not there with 3G, so there could be some lag there with 3G, and maybe possibly 4G.
Excellent. So our next question is, does this tool capture reporting?
Wasif, you want to take that one?
Yeah, they're from the
Yeah.
SureMDM components. Yeah, Wasif, go ahead and why don't you give an overview of what we can capture from a reporting perspective?
Absolutely. So SureMDM does come with a list of preloaded reports, such as inventory tracking or asset management, things of that sort, as well as it does come with with a custom reporting tool. Basically, you can pick and choose what data points exactly you want to run inside a report, and you can run those specific data points as part of that custom report. You can also schedule to receive those reports on a daily, weekly, or a monthly basis. So we do have a very exhaustive reporting tool.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, everything on our console is API driven. So if you have a customized reporting tool like Crystal Reports or some other thing like that, building connectors to those to overlay our reports on top of those reports or vice versa is something we have the capability of doing and supporting as well.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is, many clients are preferring Linux-based operating system-based solutions. They don't want Windows or Android. Can we have same support for Linux as well?
Yes, for AMT, we work in both Windows and Linux distributions, any Linux distribution. And we have tools that we have to configure those machines to do that.
And SureMDM will support Linux devices as well. We mentioned IoT devices, and there's a wide range of operating systems within those sorts of devices. So yeah, we can take a look at it, investigate it. We may have to have what we call a plug-in to help work with that, but we support that as well.
Yeah, and I believe he expanded upon the question a little bit and said many clients have security concerns they're looking for with Linux-based solutions. For example, some of them are soft waste-based company, government, military, and much more. So that was why specifically he was looking for Linux. So just waiting to see if there are any other questions that are coming in. Anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to share them.
So this is Corey. One of the questions I've seen come in was, how do you actually identify these platforms, Ming? What would you recommend the best way to figure out what you have in your environment today?
The best way is on each platform, there should be a vPro sticker, right? So where the CPU, under that, there should be a vPro sticker or a badge on the machine. We also have various tools that we can run to identify, in depth on what AMT version or what firmware version it has. But get a hold of us after the webinar, and we can point you to these tools in different ways to identify the machine.
No, thanks, man.
Excellent.
The last one I was going to bring up, what I didn't hear was I was expecting is, Jim, do you guys have a way to get started with this, or free trials, or what would you recommend the people listening? How would they get started with SureMDM?
Right. If any of this sounds interesting, you go to our website, www.42gears.com. There is a free trial link there. There's also a lot of information on our site, documentation. But send an email to that sales@42gears.com alias. We can help you get started right away. We'll walk you through what the platform looks like, help you get some devices enrolled, test it out, and make sure it meets your requirements.
Excellent. We've had a great webinar today, unless there are any other late breaking questions.
None from my side.
Well, I wanted to just take a quick moment before we wrap to thank the Intel team. It's been a pleasure working with you guys on this integration and getting everything set up. Thank you for all your hard work and helping prepare for this webinar and getting everything put together. So thank you guys, and I hope everybody stays safe from COVID-19 and we get through this pandemic together. So thanks
Likewise,
again.
Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, I wanted to say thank you to our panelists for joining us today and all our participants. And also, please stay tuned because we will be posting this webinar live if any of you would like to record it to watch it afterwards.